You know, Rebels, if you've been checking out some of my promotional ads on social media, you'll be aware that I have been using a lot of AI programs to help me create ads. But you know what? There's a lot more uses for AI than just funny little videos. And I'd like to introduce one of our new sponsors, Podium. It is a leader in creating AI tools for podcasters. Now, let's say you've got a podcast, or maybe you're even thinking of doing a podcast. You're probably wondering, well, how can AI be integrated with your workflow? I'll tell you about Podium. As a podcaster, you know that writing show notes and creating chapters and transcribing episodes takes a lot of time, and it can cost you a lot of money too. But you know what? That's where Podium comes in. It's an AI tool designed specifically for creators and podcasters with the goal of making post-production tasks quick and easy. And in just a few minutes, Podium generates show notes, chapters, summaries, clips for social media, a full transcript, suggested episode titles, social media posts, and more. Whew, that's a lot of work for one little program. Your show notes are key to your podcast's success because it helps new listeners find your podcast and they'll know if it's a fit for them. You know, kind of like too many podcasts. It also improves your SEO, that's your search engine optimization. Ooh, big phrase there. And overall accessibility. And with Podium, you can focus on creating a great podcast and let Podium's AI do the heavy lifting. But Podium isn't just for solo creators and podcasters. It's a game changer for editors, producers, marketers, agencies, and production studios. Teams that use Podiums are able to increase workloads, decrease turnaround times, and improve their quality. How does it work? Very easy. First, go to Podium's website, and you'll see that link that's right there in the show notes. You get 3 hours free just to try it. Pretty cool, huh? And using that link also supports this show as well. And you know what else happens? Because I'm a good guy. You use my link, you will get 50% off for your first month. So visit the site, upload an MP3 file, and download your files. And that's it. And if you need anything else, you can use Podium GPT to generate articles and any marketing copy you might need in seconds. Instant show notes, transcripts, chapters for your podcast or channel. This will level up that podcast. So check out Podium today.
The Sherpa Screening Room is a presentation of the Sherpa's podcast picks, which can be heard on podcast apps everywhere, and the Sherpa-lution YouTube page. It's where you'll hear from creators from many fields from all over the world. Now, we take you to the Sherpa Chalet, where your host, Jim the Podcast Sherpa, awaits you. Kind of like how I'm waiting to get paid for this.
Welcome back to another episode of the Sherpa Screening Room. This week, it's an interview with Grackle Maurice. A grackle is a bird known for the sound it makes. If the Sherpa were to take a bird's name, it would be Turkey. You'd only want to see him once a year at your table. He's got no taste, and you really don't want a neck like his.
Coming to you from Sherpa Chalet in beautiful downtown Mount Podcastia, it's time for entertainment interviews in the Sherpa Screening Room. Grab an aisle seat and a bucket of popcorn, but don't crunch too loud or you'll miss the show. Now, here's your host, Jim, the Podcast Sherpa.
Rebels of the Sherpa-lution, and welcome to the Sherpa Screening Room. It is a presentation of the Sherpa's podcast picks, and it is me, your Sherpa, Jim the Podcast Sherpa, to be more specific, coming to you from Sherpa-lu Studios here in the Sherpa Chalet, high atop Mount Podcastia, overlooking all the wonderful podcasts that are out there. You know what happens in these episodes. We get to talk to the creators, you know, the singers, the dancers, the actors, the musicians, like the guy that we will be talking to today. His name is Grackle Maurice, and he's out in California right now. He's got an interesting life story. He's been working on some really unique music. You might want to check it out if you're into unique music. We'll keep that in mind. So let's head on to a unique interview with Grackle Maurice. Hello there, Rebels. We are here in the Sherpa Screening Room. My guest today, his name is Grackle Maurice. That is his name, his performing name. He's coming to us on audio. You don't have to wave. They won't see. But he's here, coming to us from California. He's a music producer and a musician, and he's got a lot of stuff going on. We're going to take a little time to get to know him. Aaron, welcome to the show.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Now, you have been a musician pretty much all your life. Would that be a pretty fair summation?
Yes, sir. That would be a very fair estimation. It's not that I've embraced it all my life. There's been some, times when you want to just run from things, but you always circle back, and that's kind of the point that I'm at right now.
Okay. And you were a guitarist first and foremost, or were you playing other instruments too?
Actually, it was a little bit of an interesting start. I started in just basic 5-6-year-old piano lessons. I wasn't exactly a prodigy there, but great to start with that. And then in elementary school, it was just kind of a by chance circumstance where it was like, hey, we have 4 stringed instruments and we need 4 kids to volunteer and play them. And I guess I raised my hand. I don't really remember, but I do remember getting my hands on that cello. I don't know, 1st, 2nd grade, somewhere around that range. And that just kind of brought out my taste for wanting to gravitate to stringed instruments.
Okay.
So then I went from there to, guitar came next. I want to say I started on electric first and then went to acoustic. And then eventually I got into bass guitar, and then I got into the big old upright fretless string bass.
Okay.
Because the high school band, they had one of those. The deal kind of was, hey, if you'll play it in concert band, then and help us a little in marching band with your guitar skills, then you can play the stuff. So
how do you march with a guitar?
Well, you play in the pit.
Oh, okay. They just kind of wheel you?
Yeah, actually, yeah, pretty much.
I've never seen too many guitars on a marching band, but I guess it's possible.
Well, they only did it that one. Well, I take it back. There was a bass guitar, I feel like, maybe for a couple songs, but it really only happened because it was a rock and roll show that year.
Uh-huh.
We started with Bohemian Rhapsody, and then we got to play some YYZ by Rush. That was a really good year.
Oh, okay. So what were your musical tastes like growing up?
Oh man. I would say probably the first I got into, because I was just the right age. And it was the mid-90s, early mid-90s, and I would say I got most into the pioneers of the time, like 9 Inch Nails. Who else? Of course, I got into classic rock. I was lucky that I was adopted to a dad who was very into music as a child, very into the classic rock. So Jimi Hendrix, that was the big influence that he always played me even before I got my hands on a guitar. So he was.
So in other words, he broke you in the right way.
Yeah, yeah. He was always like, here, just listen to this. I'm not forcing you. I'm not, giving you your plan for your life, but listen to this as much as you can. Brainwashed to that,
It's interesting because I think when that happens too, when you're exposed to like earlier forms of music when you're a young person and you really kind of understand where things are coming from, you can kind of really understand where music is going, you get that kind of evolutionary standpoint.
Yep. And he gave me the perfect, Jimi Hendrix emphasizing that point was perfect, because then he puts a guitar in front of me, same kind of guitar, an electric guitar. And I'm learning from Jimmy, you want to follow some general structure, but at the same time, just get gritty, get raw, and just down and dirty, just
Absolutely.
make up some shit. And I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Okay. And, just roll with him. And I carry that with me even to this day. So it's kind of one of those lessons where even if you forget it halfway through life, you're going to grasp it again eventually as a musician.
Were you a band guy?
It's kind of funny because after that rock and roll show, which was my freshman year of high school, I sort of drifted away from music a little bit. I don't see it as a bad thing because I wanted to break into some other arts. I got into creative writing, and I was going to get into independent filmmaking. I kind of already was. I actually kind of got a special recognition from a festival when I was only 12 years old. So it's kind of like, hey, Dad, I think I should focus on that. Even if I want to get into music later in life, it's a skill I could really bring to the table for that too. So I feel like I should dive into that. And that's what I ended up going to college for. So no, I didn't. It was kind of like as soon as I crossed that age range where I would get into bands, some of my friends were. I was hanging out with them. I was kind of being around their shows, and I was filming their shows. But I was that guy back then. These days, yes, if I had that chance to do it again, I would say, well, maybe I could wait on the film stuff and join some bands and see what that's like. But hey, I'm about to start getting into that now. I'm going to start playing live here pretty soon with some people.
Okay. And I mean, while you were you also getting involved with making movies as well, I mean, did you ever consider like scoring the movies as well? Was that part of it, or was it just a completely different animal for you?
Absolutely. Starting in 20, it's hard to say. It's been like a 5-6 year venture. I've been writing like a really long extended streaming series, and I just got crazy a couple years of my life, probably right around the time of COVID, like everybody, where I'm just like, you know what, let me take this dream and at least make a pilot episode, you know? Nobody really does that because it is very, very expensive and stressful. But I said, hey, you know, if I could swing it, I'll learn everything I can. And then even if I'm self-funding it, I'm cutting half the budget.
So what kind of streaming series were you doing now?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's titled Shadow Legacy. It can be found on my Facebook page. That's probably the best place to find it, but it's also on IMDb. It's really it's a sci-fi horror fantasy, kind of a little bit into the sword and sorcery genre. Mm-hmm. But it's interesting because it's like a juxtaposition of present time and past, and it's a story that goes through the ages of two characters that are constantly reincarnated throughout history, and they're always destined to do battle with each other and kind of shape society in the process. So now it's sort of an end time scenario in the modern times, but it flashes back to the beginning to kind of show how all that was set up, the stage was set. It's one of those things you just want to kind of expand and expand and expand. So I said, hey, let me at least do a pilot episode as best as I can and just kind of see what happens with it. And long story short, we did make a short version. I'm a perfectionist, so I want the hour-long pilot episode. That's what I've really been for. But then all the strikes happened and all this stuff with the business, and I'm an indie guy, so that doesn't it just makes everything a lot harder. It's not like it's impossible, but I will get to it someday. I just have to kind of wait for the climate to calm down a little bit more.
Okay.
But it's very close to being done, the full version. The short version has won several awards. And yes, to get back to your question, I did score music myself for that. I had a band person who I've always been friends with, who I reached out with, and he kind of helped me make a few of the tracks on that. But otherwise, I designed the sound, like the sound effects, since it is sci-fi and horror. And then I did some of the music myself, not all of it. So it was kind of a partnership between he and I. And we won dozens of awards, not just for music and sound, but I would say music and sound is probably where we won the most awards. 2022 and 2023, that was.
Oh, that's incredible. And you've also done music production for other artists as well, right?
Not quite yet, to be honest. When I did it for myself for that particular project, just really a couple years ago, that's when the idea first came, the crazy idea, like, hey, let me just start doing music, even if it's not just for film projects. Mm-hmm. So no, not really, but I would love to get into that. That's going to be my next bridge to cross here. I'm definitely going to be putting it out there for any filmmakers. I can do any genre of music, and you can check out my music, of course, online. I would love to be a part of some independent film projects coming up.
Right. I know you had a song on your Facebook page. It was like death metal and flamenco.
Oh, yeah. Well, some punk and flamenco mergers. Yep. The goth. Yeah, I'm just kind of experimenting at this point. I did grow up with flamenco. That was sort of a little before the band era I mentioned, like a little bit before high school. While I was still in middle school, my adoptive father got some really good professional Spanish flamenco guitar lessons for me. And I don't know what that man was thinking. He's brilliant, that father I had. And he got this wild idea. There should be a merger between blues and flamenco music. And if you could harness the flamenco, actually get it down and know it, then you could carry that into blues. And I was a orphan from Mississippi, so I think he just kind of saw it as I should give this kid a destiny that seems right for him, you know? And I don't know, now that I'm kind of just first getting into that idea, I sat down for about a week or two and started fooling around with it and just doing some raw improvised recordings. And I feel like after a few weeks experimenting like that, that merger he mentioned so many years ago, it's tangible now. And I think I'm going to start putting stuff out like that.
Were there any other experimentations that you had with like different genres of music and throwing them together apart from that?
Oh yeah. There's the flamenco punk we mentioned. A little bit of death metal feel. I just wouldn't call the song pure death metal. The fans would definitely eat me alive for saying that.
We don't want to piss off the death metal fans.
Yeah. A little bit of the classic rock mergers, of course. I always got to honor my classic rock. If I do a pure blues song, I like to put at least a little flamenco spin on it. My fiance and I, we've done a little bit together because she's into some music as well. She's more on the acting side of things and the film side of things. But once in a while we get together and we did some, I don't know if I'd call it hip hop, but it's a little spoken wordy. It's a little more of a hip hop feel than what we usually do. So I don't know. We just kind of take the genres that are most favored for our ears, and I'm just an explorer, man.
I guess with playing blues though, you really have to understand the soul of the music. It's not just playing the chords, and you really have to know the feel. And I guess if there's that other genre that the soul of, probably putting them together, it probably doesn't become as difficult as most people might expect.
As long as I feel like it's a little bit of both the training, at least early age helped me, because then it's like, oh, well, even if I gave it up for a decade and a half, I could still come back to it because it was so early implanted for me,
Right.
Don't get me wrong. It was a combination of that. And then I still had to really work for it and be willing to work for it. But yeah, it's a good thing you brought that up, because flamenco is the same exact way. And I like to look into theory too in music. And I found something interesting, because I'm always kind of just looking stuff up. And when I was researching flamenco the other week, I've been looking for a link between it and blues for quite some time. Mm-hmm. I've always suspected that in the Canary Islands, it was the flamenco elements were picked up and were brought here to America. And that was part of, I do believe, the European parts that came from there to here to create blues. I think flamenco was part of that. And I did find a link about a week ago where I didn't even know this, but certain styles of flamenco were invented in the fields as well. It was just in a whole different part of the world. It was in Southern Europe, mostly in Spain. And that was how some of those styles of flamenco came out. They were improvising. They were getting into the soul of it. They were hard laborers, all of them. They just created their own perspective genres. And I really think that's a little bit how blues was created. I mean, if they're both invented the same way in two different places, eventually those cultures will cross,
Absolutely. And I think especially in the United States, it's such a melting pot of different musical styles, especially when probably around the earlier turn of the centuries, like around the 1900s, and people probably didn't even realize it, even now in like the age of more electronic devices and electronic style of music, things come together, and you're like right along that same track with well, let's do a little bit of this, a little bit of that, because you get to be influenced by a lot of different styles of music as well.
Right. And I feel like as good as technology is, it puts some of us in a box, and it's like some of us just get hooked on that one genre of music, and it's like, and it's always played on the radio, and then we hear it at Walmart and everywhere else, and it's like, that's great, that's fine, but yeah, where's the exploring, even as listeners, I feel like we all need to open up a little bit more and hear some other world genres and get into some stuff.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, sometimes I think maybe, I don't know, do you think maybe that's what's kind of hurting radio, that they don't really take that next step, that those classic rock stations pretty much play the same 30 songs, of course.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I feel like that's definitely a big problem, even with just certain genres that are just kind of flattening out these days in comparison to where they stood in 60s and 70s. It's like, some elements of classic rock. It's like, I feel like it's no one to blame specifically, but it's like, I feel like that is part of the problem. It's like we latch on to just X songs and X groups, and
we stay with the familiar.
Even I've fallen into that. I mean, and here lately, it's like, just break out of that and just start listening to some new stuff, Start listening to friends who say, hey, have you heard this? Have you heard that? I mean, I've got a special place in my phone for when people bring up certain things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I gotta say, you stay with the familiar, and sometimes people just don't want to think outside the box and say, hey, I might like this, or sometimes it has to become like a wave for it to fascinate you, where there's only that that handful of people who will kind of get in on the next big thing, and they'll say, wait, this is coming. And, even I think I listened to music from like the 60s onward growing up with that. And, I noticed that, there wouldn't be too much of a change, with what gets played on the radio. There's styles and everything like that, but it doesn't really go, there's not a wild differentiation between the music. It's still very pop. It's a pop song is 3 minutes and a rock song is 5 minutes. And, and there's nothing, that becomes interesting after a while.
Yep, exactly. And yeah, I love my music from the 60s. I feel like that could be pulled from too. I'm one of my biggest influences, probably the Doors. Mm-hmm. And I feel like there was a little bit of a wave, especially in like the early to mid 80s, where everyone was kind of playing a little bit elements of the Doors, especially the British bands, like the post-punk bands. You have the Stranglers, Talking Heads, bands like that. I feel like they kind of were riding that wave a little bit. But then it's like after that, it kind of just petered out. And I'm kind of wondering where's the Doors wave, Like, right. Why don't we get some classic, bring psychedelic rock back a little bit? So I actually like working with those elements. I usually like to put just a little flavoring of that in to each genre, each song I do, no matter what. I love like Pink Floyd, the Doors, mm-hmm. all those, the really big classic rock, even Led Zeppelin. But yeah, they get played out on the radio now, and we just don't appreciate those groups like we used to. So like, let's bring them back, let's start fusing some of those elements in modern. I think that's one of my big goals overall. And it's a work in progress. I'm constantly improvising some new. I just sit down and I record on my beat up guitar, and I have the faith in myself that I can hold a rhythm, that I can hold a key. I'll go record a backup guitar that's about the same time length, but I'm doing more chords than I am like strumming in classical style. And then I'll do the same thing on a bass guitar, the fretless bass guitar that I have. And then I'll just get into Ableton on my computer and I'll splice them together. And rarely do I even make any cuts. I just like to kind of take the raw improvised recordings and make a beat out of it. And then next thing I know, I got a song.
Okay. Well, it's fresh in my mind. Sure. You use a performing name, being Aaron Grackle Maurice.
Yep.
How exactly did that come about?
Well, kind of a few different elements to that. Let me think of which to prioritize the most. A few different reasons. Okay, so I obviously stated that I got some influence from my adoptive father quite a bit, and he would always joke that the people who knew him best, his friends, like his brothers, only they would call him Bird, because for whatever reason, he was just bird-like to them. So being as how he kind of influenced me a lot growing up, he and I actually bonded quite a few times over some bird activity. I don't know why. It just kind of seems like birds have always been a favorite of mine and just kind of always around. And recently, since I mentioned I was adopted pretty much on day one, right? As in my mom shows up at the hospital in Pascagoula, Mississippi. And then the doctor just kind of took sympathy on me because I was a very little baby. And I don't think my mom was even really knowing that I was there, because I was so small and she didn't really show. So the doctor basically just took sympathy on me. I was the lucky one, and he took me home and then arranged after a couple weeks to get me adopted with the parents I ended up with. So the reason I'm mentioning that with the bird story is recently I've had a lot of awakenings in life, and this is one of the ones that actually led to the music. Is I realized, well, I don't know my origin story, so no wonder I don't know what to myself as an artist. I knew there was more that I had to do. I was working on Shadow Legacy at the time, but there was like a little bit of a break period. And so I basically said, well, if I don't know my origin story, then of course I don't know what to do. So let me go ahead and just kind of uproot life and go drive down to Pascagoula, where I was born, just kind of see what the deal is. And by the time I got there, I went straight to a park that was along the beach, and that was what I saw, was just a bunch of birds, just all kinds of seagulls and cranes and the really big swamp birds. And it just kind of it gave me a lot of deja vu in life. And it made me realize that those birds were probably there whenever the doctor and his wife would walk me to that park as a baby. So that somehow, I don't know, it just like sparked the energy in me. It made me realize like there's music in my head, there's music in my soul, and I need to get it out. So I think that trip was really just my subconscious saying, go home, figure out your shit, and heal and figure out who you actually are. And I'm a totally different person. I was meant to be a totally different person, but it's no one's fault. I had to be adopted. I had to have a home, but it's kind of like you get taken like that out of a bunch of trauma and stuff. You know, you can only bury it so much. And it's kind of like I had to find that. And I think that was one of the last messages my adopted dad gave to me before he passed away about 15 years ago as well.
He sounds like a very wise man, Aaron.
Extremely, extremely. And I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for him. Simple as that. That Karen too, his wife, she was just a different kind of good. She was more of the nurturing mother type. She was actually a professional nurse, and I was very sickly since I was born so small. So I'm actually only here because of both of them. She rescued me in the middle of the night many times when I had my little asthma attacks.
Mm-hmm. But you made it though. You got through the tough times, and you really, you're on this journey to really discover who you are, and you know that you were born to be a musician, and you just putting yourself out there.
Yep. So I see it as I kind of have an open communication with the birds, especially with the crows. So after that trip, I realized, that's kind of part of who I am. My style of playing too. It fits into that. I do the fretless bass, and I'm always kind of a wild man on it. I'm always sliding up and down the frets like crazy and just making really abrupt, unpredictable moves, kind of like the Grackles do in the morning. They're those birds that make the loud, the really loud chirping that sounds good, but it's like enough already,
That's an interesting way to put it.
Kind of like Flea. I probably thought of the way Flea got his nickname because some people don't really know what the deal with his nickname is, and it's just because he was so much of a spaz, and even just in conversation with people, he'd come up and give them the wisest words like they've ever heard, but then he'd have such ADD, he'd go off and hear this and go off and do this, and so the name just stuck. He jumps around like a flea. Mm-hmm. So I kind of thought the same thing about the Grackle. I was like, well, I kind of do behave like one a little bit.
Okay. So what's next for you?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I'm looking into playing live. I've talked to a few local bands and kind of seeing who I'm going to get involved with there. And that's a big next step. And then I'm also having a few side projects in the works. We did talk about some flamenco. I've got more of a pure modernized flamenco concept that I'm working on. And I've been looking for a partner. My Spanish is pretty good, and I could probably teach myself a little bit of the actual flamenco singing, but I would rather have somebody's help who's got a little more experience. So I've been reaching out to the Latin communities, and I might have a partner from Argentina who's a very good musician. He's mostly a drummer, and he's willing to do some singing. And he basically just said yes tonight, actually. So we're definitely going to work on something. It's just kind of no telling when it's going to materialize. But I've got a lot of the songs already made. It's just we have to put our heads together on how to finalize the instrumentals I built, and then how he's going to put his vocals in. And then also speaking with a few people here in the States as well about some other partnerships, and hoping to just get involved in a lot of the different communities and get involved in different cultures and cross all those bridges, man. Just create bridges, build bridges in the world of music.
So if people want to hear your music, is there anywhere that they can go to?
Absolutely. You can find, as a solo artist, I'm still working on some stuff. I do have a few things that are available on the same source, but it's mostly it's kind of like a band name that my fiance and I came up with that was the first album that I built. Basically, I was the sound designer on it and did the lead vocals, and then she helped with backup vocals, and her voice is beautiful. So she really, really contributed well to that album, and that's mainly where I'm at the moment. And you can find that on iTunes or Spotify. And we're
under your name, under Aaron Grackle Maurice?
Search, yes, you can find it that way as well, because I am credited on all of the work of the first album.
Okay.
So you can either find it that way or by punching in the band's name, which is Rebels of Requiem Way.
Okay. Rebels of Requiem Way. Got it.
Yeah. Or maybe the album name, might be able to find it that way. Season of Reason.
We have a portion of the show and it's called Shameless Self-Promotion. Is there anything else that you want to let people know about apart from everything you're working on, or you think we got it just about covered?
Well, I pretty much brought up Shadow Legacy already. Nothing really that comes to mind at the moment.
Okay. So we got you covered then now.
Yeah, I think so.
All right. So his name is Aaron Grackle. Maurice, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me.
Let's get back to the Sherpa. Sorry about that.
No. Thanks a lot to Aaron for swinging by the Sherpa Screening Room, and be sure to check out some of his music on social media or on his YouTube channel as well. And also, thanks to you for listening and spending a little time here with me, kicking back here in the Sherpa Chalet. And we have new episodes every Wednesday. Well, maybe not next Wednesday, because if you are listening in real time, next Wednesday will be Christmas 2024. And we will be presenting to you a Sherpa Select. It's the Christmas episode. You know, the episode with Kat McLead. I did it a few years ago, really, when the show was pretty new. But I like the story, and I like to keep it as a Christmas episode because it's very inspiring. So I hope you have a listen. And if you are enjoying what you're hearing, Sherpa-lution is the word that you need. And that will help you. Follow me on social media, Facebook, Instagram, X, TikTok. And if you'd like to message me and ask me any questions, feel free to. You can also email me at jimthepodcastsherpa@gmail.com. And don't forget, on Saturdays, for a while, we will be doing more Sherpa Selects, where you will be hearing the best of episodes from seasons 1 through 6. I think we're on 3 so far. We're going in order. I like things in order. I don't know. I'm weird that way. But since the holidays are upon us, I just want to say have a happy holiday season, regardless of what you are celebrating. And let's hope that it is a joyous one and that we all go into a happy 2025. And viva la Sherpa-lution!
Thanks for listening to the Sherpa Screening Room. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, review, and share this podcast. I'm Mr. Bruce, and this has been a Sherpa-lu Studios production. Viva la Sherpa-lution!